Delighted today to spend some time with you to talk about the concept of project management office and specifically how to improve the PMO within the organization. First thing, why does PMO matter? Okay, so the reality is that professional services teams, when they're well optimized, and optimized here is in italics, and I'll explain why in a quick sec, you make a lot of money, i.e. bank, and you make happy customers. According to SPI research, so this comes from our friends at Alta Consulting. What this is saying is that companies that get to at least a level 3 of what's called deployed start to run profitably, and that is the entry point to, let's say, level 4 or level 5 optimized. So we're going to be talking a lot today about how to get to that kind of optimized level, and the idea of PMO is really important. And so basically, this is saying is that in the neighborhood of 5-6% of the survey respondents are at an optimized level, and you can see the results that these companies are achieving. Their profitability on services or in the business is at 30%. Which is excellent. So you're generating lots of cash in that business. The annual revenue per billable consultant is $300,000, and the employee billable utilization is 83%. And you kind of contrast that to that level 1, where the employee utilization is at 50%, and that revenue per billable consultant is at a third. So you can see the power of becoming optimized. It doesn't require 3x team size. It really just requires you to get the existing team that you have fully utilized and to get really, really good at delivery. You can see here the product's delivered on time at 90% versus 60%, and the project gross margin at 50 versus 25. So how do we get to optimized? So the first one is weekly project reviews, and this I think underpins like the kind of idea that you could actually look at all your projects from one pane of glass, right? So for a lot of organizations that may or may not be possible. So if you're using disparate methodologies, disparate tools to manage projects, you may not actually have a place where you can aggregate all those projects from a single view. But if you don't have that, then you need to figure out, even if you're using a spreadsheet, what are the active projects? What are the new projects that have come in? What's the status of the active projects? Status is on, off plan, something as simple as that. You can break it down even further. What's their project progress percentage relative to end dates? Earned value, cost variance, effort variance. If you can kind of review this information from a single glance and allow the team to drill in on projects that are having problems, then you're in a good spot. So this screenshot here is of TekStack. I'll go to the live product here. So I'll go to look at my my views of all projects, showing that kind of information. So here would be all the open projects from from the dates that I care about. I've got the name of the project. We can classify the projects. I think this is a really important concept. So for example, how you deliver customer onboarding projects versus, let's say, a work order project, or let's say a sales discovery project. You kind of want to be able to analyze that kind of stuff. Work orders are generally a lot easier than customer onboarding. So if you've got a problem with projects, well, hey, what kind of projects are there? What's the end date? So here, I'll take this lift project as an example. We have an end date. I've got a 100-hour project. I've done 8 hours. So I have a problem. I have a $20,000 project here, which is the budgeted sales amount, 8% progressed, supposed to be finished. Let's drill in a little bit further. So you kind of want to be able to, on any given PMO meeting, really dive in to find out what's going on with these projects. Figure out why the end date hasn't moved forward. So in this case, the project managers clearly stumbled on something and didn't update the project plan accordingly. You might want to drill in and understand exactly what your condition is for cost and margin. So The budgeted cost on a $20,000 project was $5,000, so the gross margin was 75%. We're actually projecting an 88% gross margin on this project with a lower cost of delivery, which sounds great, except that we haven't actually delivered anything yet. You can see, who the team members have been assigned to this project. You can see all the time entries. So in this case, we saw 3 team members, but we only have 1 time entry for 1 resource. Everything is in one place. So that, certainly these PSA tools like TekStack, others, will make it easy to be able to drill into the specific projects and kind of see what's going on. So that's very important that you go through a weekly project review in these meetings. Probably just want to highlight the new projects and then the problem projects. The second thing you want to cover off is resourcing. So this, if you recall the SPI research results from that benchmark, is it a coincidence that the utilization of the optimized organization at 84% drives that much profitability? Absolutely not. There's 100% a correlation between profitability in a services organization and your ability to get resource utilization where it should be. So what do you want to be able to do on a weekly basis? Certainly you want to be able to review all the time entry that has occurred in the last week. You want to make sure that people are accounting for, for example, if you set a utilization target of 80%, that means out of a work week of 40 hours, that 32 hours have been accounted for. Is that billable or non-billable? I mean, this is the kind of analysis you need to be able to do. Ideally, you want people to account for 40 hours out of their work week. But I think the last thing you want to do is create one of those anchor kind of internal projects like overhead or admin, because before you know it, that's going to be the #1 project in your system is overhead. The types of categories you really want to be able to identify would be things like customer projects, whether or not they're billable or not, support, pre-sales or sales support, R&D, and then if you're doing internal projects, they should be specific projects, not general admin categories. So a great example would be like preparing for a user conference or documenting the product. Those are very specific projects. You don't generally want to make it easy for employees to account for dead time or bench time. So by creating a general admin project, you're kind of just asking for it. So make sure that time entry is updated. You want to be able to compare actual to book. Now this sounds a lot easier than it actually is. The process should be that you go into these PMOs and you're booking people to projects. Now what you want to be able to do is compare what they were booked against what they actually did. So tools like TekStack kind of give you that visualization. So here you can see I've got a very small set of resources here just to kind of keep things easy to look at. Generally, you're going to want to set green at like 80, 85%, yellow at something between 70 and 80 or 85%, and red anything under 70. And that allows you to quickly see if anybody's off, right? So we have 2 problems here with David. We have the first problem that we didn't book enough work for David. And the second problem is that David actually hasn't done any work. A third problem is that David has been assigned, in this case, 2,800 hours of work that he hasn't done yet. Again, this is just data from my demo environment. We keep loading David with work and we're not actually doing any of the work because it's a demo environment. But if this was a live environment, you can see the usefulness of this kind of information. Now, like booking, it's really a marriage of supply, who your resources are, and the demands coming into the business. So each week you should be looking at all the new tasks that have come in and need to get assigned. So there's a couple ways in these tools to assign. You can assign at a task level, which is the view I'm showing you here, or what we call project role level. Like for example, on a project, you might say, well, I have 50 hours of consulting across 10 tasks. I want to, give David those 10 tasks. So you can do it either way. So I'll just do it, maybe this task level for a quick sec. So on any given task, you can see here that this task would have a description. It's 40 hours. It's, you know, in September, and I don't really have any resources assigned to this task. So I can just force, you know, David on this by typing in David and making in the resource, or I can, you know, go to a little visual guide and I can show all resources and pick the resource that I want to assign for this task. So in this case, I can see that David is utilized 60% during these months. So I can this would overbook him, or I can assign it to this guy that has nothing going on in that week and assign the resource that way. So when you book that resource, it'll go back, update that chart that I just showed you. And then in our case, what we'd also do is send that resource a Teams message that says, hey, good news, you're now working on this project, or we have this work order, or with this task for you to work on. Here's the description, you know, go at it. So either way, that's the action that would occur by booking this resource. So make it super easy to get at all, you know, the information about who's booked and when, and all the work that needs to get assigned. And then, of course, the third bucket is spreading out the work. And that we see that all the time, right? I think most PMs kind of pick their favorite resources. So you get like the David Addisons of the world who get overbooked for everything. And then you've got the James and the Marcs and the Peters, and or not in this case, Peter's fine, but the Ryans who just don't have enough work. So here you could do workload spread as well. You could add resources to projects, add resources to project tasks, spread the work out, do that kind of thing. Now that becomes a little tricky, especially with like consultants and development, because really what they want, you really kind of want to do, it's not easier to have two people work on the same thing. You kind of want to delineate the work, the task work. So we always have recommendations on how to do that. And I think a great way to do that is to kind of dish off the analysis discovery kind of work to the senior, and then let the junior do the config, hands-on keyboard testing, that kind of work. So that is how you would basically split out your work breakdown structure. So you might have, like, for example, certain tasks to be a senior resource, and then other tasks which would be a more junior resource. And then that would be another way to split out that kind of work to help spread that workload out. But this exercise is the difference between making money and not making money. A lot of people out there think that they need to hire more resources, and the reality is that you're probably not making the right hiring decisions based on the approved work log and backlog that's out there. Becomes very difficult. It's likely you can stretch these resources an extra 10, 15 hours a month just with better scheduling and project planning. And that is a huge difference in profitability for sure. The third thing you probably want to cover off are like issues and actions that aren't getting done. So the fancy word for that is RAID. So risks, actions, issues, and the D. In our case, we purpose the D in the acronym to be key decisions. But basically, it's you know, capturing at a project level whatever the impediments are to getting that project done successfully. And quite often, these are items that are assigned to customers. Like, quite often customers are their own impediments. And as a project manager, you know, the important job is to make sure that you identify for the customer what they need to get done and when. So, you know, typically people are managing these on spreadsheets. So every project has a spreadsheet. And the difficulty of that, of course, is that when you have 40 projects, you have 40 spreadsheets, and you might have resources on every single one of those spreadsheets, and you can't see the forest through the trees kind of thing. So kind of one of the benefits of these integrated systems is that you can have at a project, you can have, for example, if I open this project, I'll have a tab that's all related to any issues on the project. So if I go to the project tab here, I can go in and kind of see kind of what's going on with the project, and I can go to the RAID and see all the risks, actions, issues, key decisions that need to be made. In this case, the project only has one. It's assigned to David. I can go figure out what's going on, with that issue. So you don't necessarily want to cover off all the issues, but you certainly want to cover off in the PMO the issues that are impeding progress on troubled projects. And that quite often might need an executive level thing. Maybe it's a resource related thing, like we see it where resources, maybe a compensation model, they only get, paid on billable work, and there's a bunch of these things that are like non-billable, so they don't get done, right? So you get that kind of stuff that, sometimes just resources may need a little kick or a little carrot or whatever, but having this in one place will certainly make life a lot easier. And also out of that are kind of risks and key decisions. I think we see it in projects. An executive makes a key decisions. Oh, we're gonna forego this, piece of the scope in this project, even though it was on the statement of work. They're like, oh, it's too much, can't take it on. You should be recording that, because it might come back to get you later on if they're holding on a billing milestone, or if like there's a blame game on why projects aren't getting done on time or whatever. Being able to capture that key decision is critical. So you want to do that, and you want to identify any risks on projects as well. Change management, we see this, most organizations don't have a formal process for change management, but also especially software companies, they're so focused on goodwill, just getting the customer as successful as possible, as quickly as possible. They kind of forego a formal change management kind of process. We would encourage, even if the change requests are $0 change requests, get in the habit of generating them. Get in the habit of the customer either email approving if it's under a certain threshold, or DocuSign approving changes, so that when you do have a dollar value change request that comes in, you're kind of in that habit already. Not doing the easy ones early make it really hard for the dollar-based change requests to kind of get approved, especially if things aren't going amazingly well on the project. They tend to become a bit of a sore spot. So, one of the reasons change management or change requests aren't generated on projects, probably the principal issue is there's a lack of definition on the statement of work, almost always. So if you're going to try to do iron triangle, scope, time, resource thing, the key in that is scope. Really defining well a statement of work, because that makes the change management conversation infinitely easier to talk through. And that could be also related to customer responsibilities. So, a great example of a change management, here's a good one. We ran out of project management hours halfway through the project because the project took too long. Well, what do? You got it. You're halfway through the project. It's been 3 months. You need another 3 months. You're out of PM. What do? Well, the right thing to do would have been on the customer responsibilities or statement of work or assumptions listing that the project management hours are based on the duration month project. If the project extends beyond 3 months, we will require a change request for project management hours. That, like, putting that language in would kind of solve that, right? But lots of companies, don't have the language put in, so it makes it really, really hard. Making it easy for your project managers to click a button and generate a change request is the difference. If you don't make it easy, it's not going to get done. So a lot of these change requests are like 4 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, but those add up, right? If you can get an extra 8 hours per resource, let's do the math really fast. If we got 10 hours, you're a team of 20, it's 200 hours at $200, becomes a sizable amount of revenue for your organization each month. the difference between profitability and not. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to make sure you can manage really, really easy and make it really easy in your system or your process to manage change. You definitely in the PMO want to review CRs, specifically in context to the RAID discussion. That's where the CRs will probably pop out. All right, stakeholder comms, super important. You want to make sure you, in a PMO and a weekly PMO meeting, but that customers have access to communications. So these could be, centralized document store, self-service portal, so they can see their own projects. Now here's a screenshot of the portal that we provide our customers so that they can provide their customers with a view of the projects. Invoices, issues, all that kind of stuff. Everything's available in a portal, but we also want to make it easy to collaborate. Email's great. I think it's a natural kind of communication vehicle, but a lot of our customers are like opening up their Teams channels, right? So they're doing, project room kind of, collaboration. Makes it super easy to communicate back and forth with customers, share documents, all that kind of stuff. So Microsoft Teams is a great tool for that, and how we kind of structure that allows you to do that. It becomes the same place to store documents and all that kind of stuff. And also making it really, really easy to generate project status updates. These project status updates should just flow out of the system, right? They should just, cover off the status of all the RAID log, cover off the milestones that are coming up, cover off the progress. Like all of that stuff, it should just be spitting out of the project that's there at the click of a button, or even automating the button clicking, so you automatically send that email out to customers. So often we've seen new customers come to TekStack, and PMs are spending all they're doing. All they're spending time on with their PM hours is generating these updates, and there's no point. Like you don't need to do that. That can be done automatically. You should be focusing your time on mitigation of issues. Another key element of this PMO is financial management. Project profitability. Which projects are profitable? Not. Why not? Billable versus non-billable time. Where are we spending our non-billable time and why? Time material invoices. Are we, did all the time entries get in? Have they generated the invoices that should be sent out to customers? There's typically an approval process around that. Milestone invoices. How many times have we seen that where, we go into accounts and they generally forget to release milestones. They forget. So the projects have milestones, the commitment delivery milestone was complete, the billing milestone should have gone out, a couple of months have gone by, project's not going well, makes it all that much harder to go get that payment. So releasing milestones when they're supposed to come out on time, but also having visibility on the future milestones, so that accounting and the project team can have that communication becomes really important. And kind of one of the things we supply in the product as well is that whole integration to invoicing and billing. So here, for example, as a view of all the billing milestones that are still open. And so here you can see that I'm in August. In my demo environment, I've got lots of billing milestones that are still open that should have been released. But at least you have some visibility from a forecast standpoint, some visibility when milestones are due. And the PM, all they have to do is mark it complete. That sends a signal to the accounting team. The accounting team can generate an invoice right off of it. So super easy. Also want to go through your revenue forecast. So here, we need to separate the whole invoicing from revenue, right? Because they're not the same kind of concept. Earned revenue is a difference between the progress made from last month to today, and being able to forecast that out. So it becomes a little bit more complicated recognizing revenue and when you aren't just a time and material shop, you're doing billing milestones as well. So, how forecasting that revenue forward, what does that look like? It flows out of these systems because we know the project plans, we know how much those projects are worth, we know what the earned value of the projects are and where they need to be, so that revenue forecast becomes automatic. But you definitely want to kind of work through that. You want to go through the backlog. Do I have enough work? And how does that impact the hiring forecast? So that's the kind of stuff you want to make sure you go through on a weekly basis. And then if there's time, what you kind of want to get into is as much continuous improvement conversation as possible. So if you have an hour PMO, ideally you can do all of what I just said in a half an hour, because ideally you're just walking up to this meeting, not you've already prepared all the data. You're only looking at exceptional data and actions that you need to take as a team, and then you can spend the next half hour each week thinking about continuous improvement. Great examples: improving document templates, standardizing project templates. These are two things that you can always do better. Quoting process. Well, hey, like we had to do a quote, or we weren't confident in the proposal, so we put in a 20% pad. Well, that 20% was the difference between winning the deal and losing the deal. So how do we get that 20% pad down to 5%? How do we perfect our scope and effort conversation? How do we improve our statements of work? How do we, improve our project update and collaboration process? Things like that. And of course, standardizing project templates is another area where we often see organizations, if they have 4 project managers, there are 4 different ways to implement the same project. Ideally, you have only a single agreed way to implement the same project, and that creates consistency that allows you to compare project to project. So for example, if you're using the same project template for onboarding across all projects, and you realize that one project task is constantly stumping everybody, you're spending too much time on it, it's taking too long, then you can drill in and figure out how to do that task better. Maybe there's something wrong in the process. You would never be able to do that if you're using different templates. The other issue, if you're not standardizing projects, is of course the customer experience is going to vary wildly between the PMs they get. And we see this all the time too. You want to be able to have a consistent approach to projects. You want to be able to onboard and improve and enrich the capability of your other project managers. And the best way to do that is templatizing, taking as much knowledge you can from the great projects and sticking it on all the projects. Reviewing terms, you used the example earlier around the, project management hours, but making sure your terms are updated, and to make sure that every proposal has the updated terms. I'm sure everybody on this call would, nod their head in agreement that if you're copy pasting from the past agreement you use, you're gonna, have an issue with consistency. So having a centralized template, allowing, terms to be used consistently, making sure those terms are reviewed quarterly, making improvements. Oh, you got caught on something. Well, how do we fix that in the future? Well, we should, include a comment around this, that kind of stuff, making sure all that's there. Do win-loss reviews with sales, how to improve the customer feedback loop. A lot of these tools like TekStack, we have really good NPS and/or CSAT scoring surveys that can loop back into the projects. You can trigger them at certain points in the project. These are great, right? Like taking an NPS survey at the beginning of a project, just before you hand off from sales, taking that same survey at the end of the project. Naturally there's going to be friction. Those experiences are hard. Likely that customer feedback score is going to go down, but you might elicit some amazing feedback, quantitative and qualitative, from the customer, making sure that you make that part institutionalized and make that part of your process. And then just analyzing common project traps. Everybody has them, and how do you just get better at it? Just allowing enough time on these meetings to have these open kind of conversations and make the first stuff I mentioned as standard as possible, where you can just click a button, walk into the project or the PMO meeting, and just get business done quickly, so you can have these kind of forward-looking conversations. Thank you very much for spending time with us today.